Welcome to Axel's Garage. Well, it's been a long day and we did a lot of detective work, and I'm going to bring you along for the ride. Well, how the story goes is I'm away on vacation and Steve-O is using his truck on a daily basis, the Avalanche, Jeff, 2005 Chevy Avalanche. So we did a ton of work to, made a whole playlist and a lot of videos, and if you've been following along, it's been progressing well, not without issue, but it's been progressing pretty well. So now Steven starts to use the truck on a daily basis. The first week he uses it, he's got about a 45-minute to an hour commute back and forth to work. So it's finally getting up to temperature and driving for an extended period of time. I had been using it previously, and most of the trips have been short trips, just been trying to iron out all the little kinks and quirks and stuff like that. 3 miles probably is the longest trip that I do, but I've done tons of them. So Steven starts driving it, no issues his first week. His second week, he's working at a different job site, and his commute gets about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes. He's going all the way out to Southampton every day from home, and that's a trip, and it's hot that week, and he runs it for the better part of a week. And on the Friday, the end of the week, he's not working on Friday, Mark takes the truck out to Axel's East, and he's driving out there, I'm away, and he calls me up and he goes, I'm driving this truck, it's running hot. When was the last time you drove it? And I said, well, it's been 2 weeks Steven's been using it. He hasn't said anything to me about it running hot. He goes, well, it's running about 235, and then I let off the throttle on the highway, and it comes down to maybe 220, but then it climbs right back up to 235. So when he gets it out to Axel's East in the shop, he then realizes it's about a gallon or so low on coolant. So tops it off. We thought maybe we had an air bubble in there that didn't get worked out, and finally did, and then we were low. No evidence of any coolant in the oil or anything like that. So we give it back to Steve-O. Steve-O starts his second week out in the Hamptons. Same thing, hour and 15-minute to hour and 45-minute commute in the heat, and on day 3 it starts running hot on him. So we tell him, check the coolant, and he checks the coolant, and he's about a gallon low again. So he adds a gallon of coolant in, drives it for another day and a half to 2 days, and boom, he's low on coolant again. So Steven adds coolant again, and I told him, I said, just add the coolant, don't drive it, wait till I get home from being out of town. And I get home, and I'm looking to hopefully try to find some kind of external leak. And I go over the entire thing, I can't find any leak. They didn't think there was a leak. They looked, they didn't find any leak. There's nothing being left behind when he parks. I was hoping that it was one of the heater hose fittings dripping onto the exhaust manifold and burning off, or one of the little crossover pipes, or right below the throttle body, you know, there's some of the small coolant connections. That was dry. And then I take the oil fill cap off, and I got moisture and a lot of water droplets and condensation. Not good. I take the dipstick out, and the dipstick is at least 1.5 quart high, and the oil looks like there's water in there. It's kind of that frothy brown color. No good. So we got oil, we got coolant in our oil, and the question is why? So we're trying to figure it out, doing a little Google tubing and YouTube searching and Google searching and message forums and things like that. And while that's going on, I happen to be, because I'm 2 months behind in editing videos, I'm editing the video that I did, that you probably saw a while back, about the problem with these engines and the PCV valves sucking oil into the intake and burning oil. You usually get a blue smoke at startup, and a blue smoke when you're coming off the throttle is the symptoms of that. And when I pulled the valve cover off on the driver's side where the PCV valve is, to make that repair, in the video that I was editing, we noticed some condensation mixed with oil residue on the back side of the valve cover. And I'll roll a clip into that here. So pulling the valve cover off here, you can see it's a little scourgy in there. I don't know why. I don't know if this is still assembly lube, but it's an oily, almost Vaseline-like consistency. So now that you saw that clip, that by itself, with no other issues, can be easily explained by me short tripping the vehicle, meaning I'm driving 1 mile to 3 miles the most, several times a day, usually a mile, several times a day, on the trips that I make back and forth to work and back and forth to the firehouse. It's 1 mile. It's easily explained with no other symptoms that I'm short tripping it and it's just condensation buildup because I'm not running it at temperature for a long enough period of time. Easily explained when that's the only symptom. And at that time, that was the only symptom. However, now that we know there's coolant in the oil, as I'm doing that video and editing that video, I get a shot with the camera of the inside of the valve covers, meaning the rocker arms, the heads, the part of the heads that you see when you take the valve cover off. And I noticed something, and let me roll in the clip here and see if you notice what I noticed while I was editing the video. On the head, there's none of that residue in the head at all, but in the back corner you can see that's, you know, where the oil sits, because there's nowhere for it to drain, so some does sit back there, which is normal, but it's spotless in there. Everything looks to be fine. All right, so did you see anything? Well, let me tell you what we did when we put this engine together. We took the rocker arms off on the rail and we left them off, and they were just they weren't dirty like with sludge. They were just stained from 240,000 miles of hot oil, hot dirty oil circulating on them. So they had that brown staining on the metal. We didn't clean them up at all because they didn't need to be cleaned up. They were just stained from the oil. They were oil stained. The heads on the engine we bought on Facebook Marketplace because the heads that were on the original engine were rotted in water jackets from the deck school, from lack of deck school maintenance. So when we bought a set of heads on Facebook Marketplace, we brought them to the machine shop. They did a rebuild and pressure tested them. They pressure tested good, and they gave them back to us. We put them on the truck, along with new lifters, along with new push rods, along with a new cam and new gaskets and all that happy horse shit, and a set of, you know, torque to yield head bolts, because they're single-use head bolts, of course they are. And we put it all back together. And now, when I took that valve cover off and then I edited the video, I didn't notice it at the time, but now editing the video, I'm going to show you a picture and look at the number 5 intake rocker arm. And you'll be able to see, if you didn't catch it in the previous clip, you'll be able to see that that rocker arm is considerably cleaner than every other one. All right, so you saw that rocker arm, clean. Well, that makes me go, because now I got that oily water condensation mix on the inside of the valve cover. I got one clean rocker arm, and now, you know, 2 months later, we got antifreeze or coolant in the oil. So what does that tell me? Well, that tells me that I got a problem with the head, to me. So I continue to search around online, and I come across a technical service bulletin that I will link in the description below. That technical service bulletin talks about a head called a Castech head. And it's a brand, a company, Castech, that makes head castings for General Motors. And they made heads 4.48, 5.3s, 6 liters. They were usually a 706 casting head, which is what these heads that we have on the engine are. And yeah, could it be that? Could it be a crack in the head that initially on short trips it was only letting a little bit of coolant through because I wasn't running it long enough at hot enough temperatures to let a lot of coolant through. It was just coming through a little bit and it was steaming, so it wasn't going in the oil because we didn't see any in the oil. The oil, it was always clean until Steven started using it every day, and it steam cleaned that rocker arm. Now in the technical service bulletin they talk about how the crack will be in the oil drain pack hole, and there's an oil drain pack hole just to the left, if you look at that head in that photo, just to the left of that rocker arm. So now putting all those things together, that's my hypothesis, that's my assumption. I got a potentially a Castech head. It might not be, it could be a GM head, but I got a crack in a known crack prone location that's steam cleaning that rocker arm. Putting it all together, like I said, everything individually might not have led me to this conclusion, but putting it all together led me to this conclusion. So I gambled. I put my money where my mouth is. I went on Facebook Marketplace again. I got a set of heads. I made sure they weren't Castech heads that was subject to the technical service bulletin issue. And I gambled. Went and looked at the heads. They seemed to be okay. Bought them, 150 bucks. Brought them to the machine shop. They gave them a cleanup, a once-over, pressure tested them, rebuilt them, new valve guide seals, all that nonsense. 300 bucks. He's numbered 450. Gasket set, and another set of torque to yield head bolts. So the head bolts were 50, so that's 450. Now I'm at 500. Gasket set, 200. So now I'm at 700. And the mechanic that does the work for us, like this kind of stuff that we hire to work on the side out at Axles East, 300. 1,000 bucks. I like puzzles. I just hate expensive puzzles. So we're at 1,000 bucks, and we're gonna see what happened when we brought the truck out to Axles East, which happened this morning. They took the heads off, the valve covers off, the rocker arms off, and the heads off. And I'll roll in a clip of what we found now. So here you're gonna find a passenger side valve cover. All right, so we got the brown oil antifreeze mix on it. All right. So we definitely got, water in the oil, which we knew. We'll look at these rocker arms. This is the passenger side. All right. And they all are pretty similar as far as how clean they are. So if we wipe the oil off and you look at all of them, pretty similar in coloring. So right here we have the passenger side head. Everything looks good on the head, and everything looks good on the head gasket. Now looking at this head, this is a GM casting, and we don't see any evidence of any problem looking at this head and looking at all the crack prone spots, which we'll get into more detail on the driver's side head. This is the passenger side head. Now we got the driver's side head. Head gasket looks good. On the driver's side again, the head itself looks good. All right, so now if we look at the driver's side head on the valve spring side where the rocker arms are. When you take your rocker assembly off, it reveals this right here. See this little battery looking symbol here? That's the casting mark. Oh, not on camera there, you go. That's the casting mark for a Castech head. So Castech is a company that manufactured heads for GM. It does say GM, you can see down here at the bottom. It says GM, right there. But they were made by Castech. And there's a technical service bulletin that I'll link in the description below about these heads cracking. So now knowing that our number 5, so if we count down, right, we got our intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust, intake. Our number 5 intake rocker was steam cleaned back when we only had a couple of 100 miles on the engine. So now we got to look a little closer in that area and see if we could see something wrong. So right here is our number 5 cylinder intake valve. And this was the rocker arm that was cleaned. And if you look right down in this hole here, if you follow the pick, you can see a crack right there. So the head bolt goes through there, but the oil drains back through this opening here. That's why they call the oil drain back holes. And the crack is right here. Let's see if I can get it on camera better. Right here, it starts about here and it goes all the way around to here. And it's just a hairline crack, but you can see it in the metal if you look really close. It's actually here. It starts here and goes all the way down. It was just one head. We're replacing them both because we got another set of heads. Might as well. And just so you have a better look at that Castech casting mark. That's it right there. It looks like a little battery. Like I said, there's a technical service bulletin on these. I'll link it in the description below. But the bulletin is spot on with what we found on these heads. So right here we're looking at the driver's side valve cover, which is considerably worse than the passenger side valve cover. So here we have the rocker arms as they would be on the heads, right? And you can see if I just wipe the side of each one, you can see how they're all pretty much the same stained color. And then you get to this one. That one is noticeably cleaner than all the rest, because that's where it was getting steam cleaned. Coming right up out of that crack.
I can make the shipment forward. It's great.
So as you can see, we had one GM casting head and we had one Castech casting head. And the Castech head was cracked exactly where the technical service bulletin said it would be cracked. And even the machine shop wants to see the head, because they said these heads don't crack. They never crack. We rarely come across a set of heads that crack, and we pressure tested those. But I'm saying they were cracked since day one. But because I was short tripping it, it wasn't at temperature. The crack grows with temperature, and my short trips were just steam cleaning that rocker arm. Steven's long trips at temperature was holding that crack open wider and longer, and allowing coolant now to flow directly in. Now, I did get a suggestion. You sure it's not a head gasket? And I, with a good degree of certainty, and you saw the head gaskets in the video before, they looked pretty good. And I didn't think it was a head gasket. And I'll tell you why I didn't think it was a head gasket. 3 things could happen when you blow a head gasket. You could leak combustion gases externally. You could leak coolant externally. So there's your external leak. Thing number 1. Thing number 2, you can leak coolant into the combustion chamber. You'll know when you're doing that, because you're gonna get white smoke. You're gonna see it burning out the tailpipe. We didn't have any of that. Or you could have I call it a passive leak, because it's not really under pressure, but you're leaking coolant into the lifter area. And if that happens, the coolant doesn't steam clean just one rocker arm. It could potentially steam clean all of them on that side, but for the most part, it's not steam cleaning anything, because it's going into a non-pressurized space, and it's dumping right down into the crankcase, and you're going to see coolant in your crankcase right away, which we didn't see. We only saw coolant in the crankcase as he was taking it on longer trips. So my hypothesis was right, that it was that cracked head, and it turned out to be a Castech head. Who knew? Now I know, and now you know, so that when you go buy a set of used heads that you're going to have rebuilt, to put on something, to make sure it's not a Castech casting, make sure it doesn't have that little battery looking symbol that indicates that it's a Castech casting. The 706s, I think these are 643s or 843s that we put on the vehicle. And the reason why I did that is because I knew, looking at Facebook Marketplace, I actually wanted the other number, which was the 643 or 843, whatever number it is, that go along with the 706s, because I knew we wouldn't have a Castech problem, and it was too difficult to explain to people who didn't know what a Castech head was on Facebook Marketplace. Can you take a picture in this spot so I could see if it's got the thing? It was just easier that way. And now I have just driven about 40 miles home in Stevens Avalanche with the new set of heads on it, with the AC cranking. It's about 95 degrees and about 90% humidity out today here in New York, and I got the AC cranking. It's nice and chilly in here. We just drove home about 40 miles, and we got 16.2 miles per gallon on the highway. I'm pretty happy with that. Now it'll probably drop a little bit as we're negotiating around through town. His oil pressure is right where it was before, at about 25 hot at idle, and about 42 to 50 at RPMs at highway speed. So I'm happy with his oil pressure. We did change the oil a couple of times, so let's add that into the cost of the repair. Add that into the cost of the repair, and 2 gallons of antifreeze concentrate, and a case of oil and 2 oil filters, and we're looking at another $100, so $1,100 for the repair. Hey, and I killed an entire day, and I'm hot and sweaty. But that's how our detective work worked. Hopefully, knock wood, that's it for the unforeseen problems in Jeff here, and that we could just do the last couple of cosmetic things that Steve-O wants to get done before he takes it back to school. We are going to road trip it coming up in 6 days. We're going to take this thing on a 1,200-mile road trip, give it its first good test, which will give us 4 or 5 weeks. It'll give us 5 weeks. So we're going to road test it 1,200 miles, and then we got 5 weeks before he goes back to school. So if anything happens to rear its ugly head on the road test, we got 5 weeks to figure it out or get it fixed before Steven really needs it. That's it today from Axel's Garage. Hope you enjoyed the video. A little long. I know I had to talk a lot, but hey, when you're doing detective work like this, you do have to talk a lot. I'll link that technical service bulletin in the description below, and I'll put down the 2 different casting number heads that we had running around on this. so that if you ever have to do this yourself, everything will be listed. Part numbers, head bolts, gasket kits, be listed in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.